holiday season has become synonymous with doing good and helping others, and perhaps no other group has become more synonymous with helping during this time of year than the Salvation Army. For decades, images of kind individuals dressed as Santa Claus ringing their bells has been a hallmark of the season. Joining us this week is Major Charles Adams of the Southern New England Division of the Salvation Army to talk about their mission and the importance of keeping others in your thoughts this holiday season. We'd like to thank our premier sponsor, Digital Back Office Palo Alto Networks. Check them out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Charles, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as we mentioned in the intro, everyone is aware of the Salvation Army. We've all heard about it, but maybe a lot of people don't, fully realize everything about the Salvation Army. Can you give us a little bit of backstory in the organization and how it kind of became synonymous with, for some of us, with the holiday season?
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. I think when people think about the Salvation Army, they think about the red kettles out in front of the stores at the holidays, or maybe even the family thrift stores. But the Salvation Army is first and foremost a Christian church. Mm-hmm. We got our start way back in 1865 in London, England. William Booth and Catherine Booth, his wife, founded the Salvation Army. And they were Methodist itinerant preachers, just had a passion for telling people about Jesus and just wanted to tell as many people as they could. And a lot of the folks that William Booth would preach to and minister to in the streets were, drunkards and prostitutes, people just wrapped up in addiction. So his plan was to tell them about the Lord and get them saved and then plug them into a local church in their community. Mm-hmm. But in that day, those folks weren't exactly welcomed in the local community as he had hoped. So he ended up starting the Salvation Army. It was just a very practical ministry. It was about meeting needs, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, and seeing people get their lives changed. And from there, we're in 132 countries today, kind of doing that work all over the world, depending on what the need looks like. As far as the holidays, it's kind of a cool story. Back in 1891, there was an officer named Captain Joseph McPhee, and he was stationed in San Francisco. And Captain Joe, he had an idea of, putting on a holiday meal there during Christmas time, and he had in mind, I'm going to feed 1,000 people in San Francisco. Only I have no way to pay for this meal for 1,000 people. So he remembered, back in London, seeing people put out these big pots down by the waterfront and charities collecting money in that way. So he took a big brass urn and he put it out on the Oakland Ferry Landing and started collecting money. And before you know it, he had enough funds to kind of provide that holiday meal. 2 years later, in over 30 different locations across the West Coast, you have kettles. And now,
and so it's over 100. This has been going on for over 100 years. That's
Absolutely.
wild.
Absolutely.
So it really is a long part of the history of the organization. That's a pretty amazing. So you said that you're international now. Is it all kind of under an umbrella organization? Is there like regional headquarters? Like how does that work?
It's very similar to a military structure. So the Salvation Army does have an international headquarters. There's a general of the Salvation Army who kind of leads international operations. But then each nation has a national commander. And within each nation, there's divisions and territories and all kinds of different stuff. So we in Connecticut, we're part of the Southern New England Division.
Got it. And as you mentioned, there's general stuff, and you are in fact a major. What is a major, and specifically for you, what is your role within the organization?
So officers in the Salvation Army are folks that have gone through seminary and were ordained ministers. It's just kind of the military, quasi-military lingo that we have. So members of our church are called soldiers, and pastors are called officers. But my role as a major just means that I've been a pastor within the Salvation Army for 15 years now. And so my role on a day-to-day basis, I'm the head pastor and the administrator here at the New Haven Salvation Army, specifically for Greater New Haven. So during the day, we have the responsibilities of food pantries and diaper banks and serving our community and getting involved in community as much as we can and fundraising. And then in the evenings, we're doing Bible studies and Sunday schools and worship services on Sunday mornings, whatever we can do to kind of be a part of the community life and meet needs.
I can't help but notice the beard. Do you ever dress up as Santa and ring the bell yourself?
I'm not much of a dresser.
No.
I think for me, I think the uniform is certainly synonymous with the Salvation Army and the holidays.
Oh,
That kind of does
yep.
the job for me. If nothing else, it starts the conversations out on the streets. But we definitely encourage the rest of our volunteers to get into the community spirit, get into the holiday spirit, and dress up as much as they would like to.
You cover a lot of territory in terms of your programming. There's diaper banks, food banks, and all this diversification, I'm sure, comes from being around for so long. What is something unique that you guys do in Connecticut or the New England area?
Sure. Yeah, I think something that we do unique in Connecticut and New Haven specifically, we have a program called Pathway of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
So what Pathway of Hope is, this is a very intensive case management program that we take families through, families that are looking to make a change, right? We recognize there's always going to be a need for a food pantry. There's always going to be a need for shelter services and soup kitchens. But there are families that have found themselves in need that are looking to kind of break those cycles of poverty for them and for their kids that are following after them. And so Pathway of Hope is one of the efforts that we have where we look at what strengths this family brings to the table and how can we build on those strengths? How can we set goals for them to meet self-sufficiency? And we've been blessed to see just tons of families that have graduated through this program that have gotten housing for the first time, custody of their kids, CNA licenses, all just a variety of different things that's going to help them kind of provide for themselves and their families.
That sounds like a great program. That was developed here too?
So it was developed in Chicago, but we launched it for the first time in our state in New Haven.
That's great.
Yeah.
So do you have a lot of communication working with towns, cities, the state when it comes to some of these relief efforts and stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, with just the variety of services that the Salvation Army provides, there's absolutely no way that we can do this on our own. It's just too many things, too many irons in the fire. So what we have in each location, each city that the Salvation Army is located in, is something called an advisory board.
Okay.
So these are folks that come alongside us. These are community officials. These are leaders, people that have kind of a pulse on what's going on in the community, have an idea of what the needs are and how to address those needs. And they're part of our advisory board, and they give advice to us as Salvation Army personnel and officers on how what grants are available in the community that we can reach out to, what community agencies can we partner with that have similar missions, or how can we complement another organization within the community that's doing something similar to us. And this goes all the way up to the state and city levels as well, talking to officials and how can the Salvation Army be an effective member of the community and an effective partner to other folks that are doing, again, similar great work.
We're talking about the holidays. We're all excited for them coming up. And it's an important time for your organization, but you also do a lot of work to help during crises. What sort of role does the Salvation Army play in a situation like what's happening out in Arkansas and Kentucky right now?
Sure. And I think first and foremost, our hearts certainly go out to those that have been affected by that terrible tragedy. But emergency disaster services is a very large wing of the Salvation Army. Whether it's a hurricane or tornado, a local fire, something as big as 9/11, or the things that are going on there in Kentucky, the Salvation Army tries to have a presence. And some of the focus of the Salvation Army in those situations, we send out volunteers, and food is a big thing for the Salvation Army, making sure people are fed, making sure that they have that sustenance. We do a lot of service to first responders and making sure that they're not being forgotten, a lot of the hours that they put in, a lot of the hardship that they see. And then another large thing that we do is just emotional and spiritual care, making sure that there's somebody for folks to talk to, right? To kind of unload a lot of this traumatic situation that they've just endured, to be a listening ear, to be a crying shoulder, to offer a word of prayer over somebody if that's what they would need.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM. We talked about the kettles and stuff as obviously one of the more visible ways that you bring in revenue, and obviously a lot of us have been to the stores over the years, the secondhand stores. But where does the Army's funding come from? Do those kettles bring in the majority of it? Is it a small part? Like how does that all work?
Yeah, the Red Kettle is probably our most iconic and visible fundraiser of the year. I know that's true for a lot of communities. It certainly is for us. And we get a nice portion of our budget from our Red Kettle income. But throughout the year, it's individual donors that come alongside of us. It's our tithes and offerings from our Sunday worship services and our congregations. it's grants that we're able to apply for to help support some of the larger programs that we have, or United Way funding, just a variety of things, really depending on what the community is and what the makeup of the need is in that community.
So it really depends on where you are, the kind of the local chapter, whatever, is looking at resources in their community. Awesome.
Right. I mean, the Army is such a big entity, and I've been blessed to be able to serve in 3 different communities in my 15 years, and each community was very, very different, right? The different needs that were available, as well as the other organizations that are already there working, doing amazing things. Right? We don't want to step on any toes. We don't want to duplicate a lot of services that are happening. We want to be an impactful member of the community, and so depending on what that particular need is. I think one example of this in Hartford, we're seeing just a rise in the need of help with victims of human trafficking. And so the Salvation Army in Hartford has started something called the Bloom Initiative, and they do street outreach. They do all kinds of very specific targeted case management for folks that have been victims of this, and long-term services as well. And so that's not a program that would be available everywhere or even necessary everywhere, but certainly something that we've seen in our area that we want to be a part of.
So that kind of on-the-ground knowledge about what the individual community needs, that's an important point, definitely. We know this is airing just before Christmas, but there's still a lot of winter to go. Is there time for individuals to help out this winter? What can they do to help?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to say that, the Salvation Army is super visible during the holidays and during the winter time, but we're present in the community all year round. And there's always space for volunteers. There's always space for, I think specifically of the winter time, we're always doing coat drives and hats and gloves and scarves, things like that. We have a very, very active food pantry. We see close to 200 families that come through our doors every single month looking for food. So food drives, things like that. You can go on our website at salvationarmyct.org, and there's all kinds of links there to register to be a volunteer or to see what your local Salvation Army address is and how you can reach out and see what the individual needs are in that location. Has
COVID presented any new challenges to you as an organization? Like, how have you guys dealt with that? I'm sure, it has sort of impacted, but how have you dealt with it?
Absolutely. So with a lot of we have tons of, across the state, tons of youth programs and music programs and senior citizens programs. And unfortunately, a lot of those had to close for a good amount of time. So it was tough to have, church services when you don't have people in the pews. So we've done a lot of our services virtual for some time. We started doing services out in the parking lot when the weather was nice and meeting in that way. Thankfully, we're starting to get back to more in-person gatherings, but COVID really took a hit. I think one of the other things to mention is, while a lot of organizations were having to close their doors because of COVID, a lot of services were closing. The Salvation Army remained open the entire time. Instead of kind of a traditional food pantry intake program, we really shifted into more of an emergency disaster type model. And so we were pre-bagging and pre-boxing food boxes for families and doing whatever we could, doing intake over the phone, doing it through doors, and just kind of doing grab and go type services, just making sure that we're still present for the community, making sure that, hungry people are going to get food, and that became just a huge thing. We served, I think, well over 3 million meals during the height of COVID.
So you adapted quick, and you also had the experience because of your disaster crisis relief efforts. You kind of knew how to work in a situation like this. You kind of already had a little bit of the work done. We've talked about the history a little bit of the organization, 150 years. All over the countries, multiple countries. What does the future hold for the Salvation Army?
That's a great question. I think when you look at the history of the Salvation Army, there's always needs, right? And I think the Salvation Army has positioned itself to be an organization that's going to be a needs meter. But that doesn't always look the same as history kind of plays out. I remember there's stories in the early days of the Salvation Army where these match factories were making matches that were making guys sick. And so our founder, William Booth, he started his own match factory and showed there's a better way of doing this that's not going to harm people. And once that was kind of done, he left the match factory and went to something else.
Yeah.
And so it's all about identifying, well, what is the particular need that this community needs right now? What are
Hmm.
the ailments? I mean, I think we see, moving into the direction of something like Pathway of Hope or the Bloom Initiative, things
Hmm.
like that. Again, we're always going to have a need for a food pantry, but we want to
Yeah.
make sure that we're attempting to meet needs on a holistic
Hmm.
level, right? Attempting to see families move from, yes, a need today, but self-sufficiency tomorrow, and
Yeah.
however long tomorrow takes. So I think we're always going to be here to see, where people are hurting, and
Hmm.
where the Salvation Army can come alongside and walk with families and walk with individuals towards healing and restoration.
Sounds like a good vision for the future.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like that. Well, Major Charles Adams, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much for having me.
And thank you for doing all the work. And one more time, the website they should check out.
SalvationArmyCT.org.
All right. Thanks so much, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well.
We'd like to thank our guest, Major Charles Adams. I'd like to thank our premier sponsors, Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks, who you can check out at digitalbackoffice.com and paloaltonetworks.com. In the spirit of the season, we thought we would revisit some past interviews with other charitable organizations working in Connecticut's communities. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely happy to be here.
So first off, could you tell us a little bit about some of the basic principles of food share? What you do, what communities you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are the Feeding America food bank for the state of Connecticut. So we are Connecticut Food Share, or your community food bank, and we feed all 169 towns here in Connecticut. About 10 months ago, the old Food Share and the old Connecticut Food Bank, both of which had existed for almost 40 years. They represented different geographic areas. They decided to get together and merge into one organization. And like I said, that was about 10 months ago, and we haven't looked back since. So we are the food bank for the entire state of Connecticut. People donate food to us, corporations, organizations donate food to us, and then we disperse it out among a network of 700 partner programs across the state of Connecticut.
Excellent.
Those 700 partners are key to helping us do what we do and feed more than 480,000 people here in the state of Connecticut.
Wow, that's really amazing. So you sort of are coordinating and working with all the smaller local shelters on a statewide basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So think of us as, we are a food bank, so think of us as a bank. I mean, people come and deposit food here, and then we withdraw that food and we bring it to different programs across the state of Connecticut.
So there's obviously the pandemic, people who lost the job and were new to this, but on the other side, there's people who have been kind of dealing with this for a while. And a recent story in the New York Times talked about something called the benefits cliff, as they refer to it.
Yeah.
Where families sometimes can get a raise and suddenly not be eligible for something like SNAP or nutrition assistance. So if they're making $20,000 a year and the limit is, $20,100, if they get a raise and they're making, $20,105, suddenly they don't qualify, but that's only $100 more a year, which is probably far less than they were getting assistance-wise.
Yeah.
So where is the disconnect with this formula? And, can getting a raise in this be a burden?
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate, and we've definitely seen situations like that before. There have been times where even here with our own employees, we've given out raises, and it means that people are now no longer eligible for a benefit that they would have otherwise been eligible for. So I wish I could say that didn't happen all the time, but it does. I mean, because so many of these benefits, particularly benefits like SNAP, it's so particular in terms of what your level of poverty has to be in order to acquire the benefit. Now, one good thing that has happened over the last 9 months in this particular administration is that they've finally taken the the amount of money or the basis of determining SNAP funds, and they've upped it to reflect 2021 prices in stores. So the problem with SNAP for many years was that it was being based on 1975 prices. And obviously the price of a loaf of bread has gone up, the price of a gallon of milk has gone up, all those things have gone up, but the SNAP program, the SNAP benefit never reflected that until finally a few months ago, the federal USDA decided to make that change. So, that's a big step in the right direction, but we're still not 100% of the way there.
And just when you brought up the holidays, is there a certain component of, do people give more and donate more during the holidays?
Absolutely. I mean, our revenue, November and December are our two biggest revenue months of the entire year. And I get it. We're out there, we're collecting money, we're doing turkey drives. This year, our goal was we needed to collect 51,291 turkeys for the entire state of Connecticut. That's how many families needed a Thanksgiving meal from us. I'm happy to report we did that, and now over the next 48 hours, we're looking to distribute all of those turkeys. So it's one thing to get them in, it's another thing to get them out. But people are also donating. They see us on TV. They see our food drives, and this is the time of year where I think people are first of all generous, and secondly they're thinking of nonprofits and they're thinking of, okay, hey, where can I donate some funds? So the challenge that we have, and it's not unique to us, it's every food bank in America, but the challenge that we have is, how do we raise enough money in November and December to last us throughout the entire year? So as I've said to you before, the summer months are the worst for food insecurity. They're also the lowest in terms of revenue for food banks across the country. So we are
double
clearly
whammy
in a position. So clearly we're in a position where we've got to raise money year round to be able to provide the services that we need at those very difficult times.
Tell us about ways for people to donate, volunteer, to help out in this time of year.
Yeah, and again, whether it's this time of year or whether it's year round, I mean, the easiest way to help support us is to go to ctfoodshare.org. That's our website. You can sign up to volunteer on the website. You also can make a donation on the website right now.
Margaret, thanks for being with us today.
Pleasure to be here, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, first of all, congratulations. You became the CEO of Columbus House just in May of this year. Can you talk to us a little bit about your background and what Columbus House does?
Sure. So I'll start with Columbus House. Columbus House is probably the largest homeless service provider in the greater New Haven area. People in your podcast may or may not know that we're also serve a lot of people in the Middlesex County area, particularly in Middletown. So people often think of Columbus House as an emergency shelter, and we do have an emergency shelter. We have about 82 beds in New Haven. But actually, we support over 300 people who are in units of housing. And we also do a small bit of affordable housing development. So we've developed around 70 units of affordable housing between New Haven and Middlesex counties.
So from reports that came out very early in 2020, kind of before a lot of stuff started happening, it seemed as if homelessness is kind of trending downward in Connecticut, which is a positive sign that we're kind of doing something right. But a lot of people might be wondering, how do we know that? How do we know about the successes? Can you talk about maybe the point in time sort of count and why it's important that we have accurate figures when we're talking about homelessness in the state?
Yeah, so the homeless service providers are actually a really networked and data-driven group. And we have something called, there's two things. One is HMIS, which is the Homelessness Management Information System. I'm going to call it that. I'm not sure what the acronym is for. But all of the providers in the state enter data into the same database. So that gives us, as a state, a somewhat of a sense of sort of like who's in a shelter bed where. And then we also do this thing that you mentioned called the point in time count. This is actually something they do across the country, where we try to pick a night in January, so it'll be very, very cold, because they want to count, they want to get the best they can moment of time snapshot of how many people are homeless. And on a cold night, the very most possible number of people will actually be inside shelters. And so that makes the counting the most accurate. And then on that night, volunteers will fan out all over the state to literally go to underpasses, to go to bus stops, to go to any place where people still might be outside, and talk to people, engage with them, understand if they're experiencing homelessness, add them to the count, and also, of course, offer them resources and assistance. So that's how we have, that's how we try to gauge sort of where we are at the moment.
In a recent thing I was reading in the Connecticut Mirror related to high need populations, there was a couple of figures that there was about 600 children experiencing homelessness in some form, and almost 1/5 of the population, there was almost 1/5 of the population as children, and almost 200 still veterans experiencing homelessness, but most of those were sheltered. Can you talk about the 2016 effort by then Governor Malloy, and you were a part of this, to end chronic veteran homelessness, which led to the figures that we just mentioned, that those 200 that we still have are mostly sheltered?
Sure. I love to talk about that, Matt, because to me, it's an example of the idea that as a community, when we put our will and our government effort behind an idea, we are totally capable of actually solving problems. I think a lot of people think of homelessness as being this like intractable thing, and that it's sort of inherently an individual problem, that people have mental illness or they have substance abuse problems. And the effort to end veteran homelessness really shows that, like, nope, it's really about resources, coordination, and the will to solve the problem. And the VA was really a very essential part of that. The secretary of the VA at that time put a huge priority on veteran homelessness. And the federal government just put a ton of money into what are called vouchers. If you're familiar with vouchers, Matt, these are essentially rental assistance that people can take to rent an apartment, the veterans can take to rent an apartment. And we have an awesome federal delegation, as you know, and Connecticut was really, really smart and coordinated in the way it used those vouchers to get chronically homeless veterans housed, to get female veterans housed, and to get veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan housed. And so by doing that, they reached what this thing called functional zero, which is a sort of technical definition. I think there's only one other state that was sort of honored in that way, and recognized for having achieved that. So it's really something to be proud of. And I think we should all just like hold on to it as an example of like, we actually know how to do this. We totally know how to do this. We could end homelessness for everyone, for sure. We definitely could do it. We just have to have the political will. Honestly, we have to put our resources into it, and we have to care about housing. We've talked,
about the federal government stuff and the state, but obviously at CCM, where the municipal leaders of Connecticut are a membership, what can local municipal leaders do to help in these efforts, and also to prepare, maybe?
Right. Well, municipal partners are really, really, really essential, Matt, to what we do. It's funny. I think they would say that we're really essential to what they do, because municipalities are really the chief partners that we have for our cold weather efforts. This year, there's some additional funding through the state because of CARES Act that's supporting these cold weather efforts and supporting the hoteling. But traditionally, cities are sort of the frontline providers, not the providers, but they're the really out in front in terms of funding and standing up warming centers, which are sort of places where people can literally come in and get warm, which is what they sound like. Yeah. And at least in New Haven, we have what we call an overflow shelter. So basically our capacity basically doubles during cold weather, and we can accommodate almost twice as many people thanks to the city of New Haven. They're the primary funder of that. So you can't, there is no homeless service provision in the state of Connecticut without the municipalities.
Yeah. And we talked about, the cities helping a lot with that, but is in Connecticut homelessness mostly an urban problem, or do our smaller towns also have issues surrounding this?
Oh, it is definitely everywhere. Columbus House merged several years ago, maybe 5 or 7 years ago, with the Wallingford emergency shelter. So Wallingford is not a big city. It's a pretty middle class place, and It's actually really heartwarming. This was an entirely volunteer-run effort on the part of the people of Wallingford to provide housing for people in their community experiencing homelessness. So yeah, there's homelessness everywhere in the state of Connecticut. In the bigger urban areas, we just have bigger numbers, so there's more visibility, but it's definitely a problem everywhere.
The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.